Again, good morning and good afternoon to all of our participants today on the Strategy Huddle. We're excited to have your participation in this month's Strategy Huddle. We were just talking, it's kind of amazing. It's already been 30 days since the last time we got together. We're excited about the topics that we have today, the questions that have come in. Again, my name is Ryan, and I'm an account manager with MyStrategicPlan and M3 Planning. And the purpose of the call today, of this monthly call, the Strategy Huddle, is really to talk strategy, to talk about that execution, and to address some real-world questions and provide some ideas and actionable solutions. And as I said, the topics today, we're pretty excited. We're looking forward to driving some participation, some feedback from everybody today. Let's cover some of the purpose and the ground rules. The ground rules, again, we encourage that participation, and the duration of the call should last about 45 to 60 minutes. Your role, ask the questions. If you have something that you'd like to add, or go ahead and use the chat box on the right-hand side. If you have any suggestions, go ahead and also use that chat box. If you have questions, you can also raise your hand during the call. I know some of you listen just on the headphones, so you can't talk in, but go ahead and raise your, or go ahead and use that chat box, and we'll go ahead and relay the information you share. The session will be recorded, and the slides will be emailed as we standardly do. Our goal to get them by the end of the week, so we do have a handout that goes along with some of the topics on today, so we'll send that, a link to the recorded strategy, as well as a PowerPoint. With that said, I'd like to take a couple minutes to introduce today's Strategy Huddle leaders, and that is Howard and Cammie. One of our team members that you are familiar with on the Strategy Huddle is Erica, and she's out traveling on business today, and so we're going to have Cammie stepping in with us today. Howard, as you know, is a co-founder of M3 Planning, which is the parent company of MyStrategicPlan, and really the brains behind the intellectual property of the system of MyStrategicPlan. He's the president of M3 Planning and also has a PhD in marketing with emphasis on research. A lot of the work on strategy and on the research side of the business is driven directly by his direction. Cammie, the new person that's joining us today, one of our team members, is a senior account manager on our professional service side of the business, the M3 side, and has a strong focus on research, specifically tying the customer's feedback to planning. And we received a few like-minded questions on this topic for this month, so we want to take the opportunity to leverage Cammie and have her join us as an expert in that area. Both Cammie and Howard are involved in the MyStrategic Planning system on a day-to-day basis, but they're also on the road working with customers, facilitating those strategic planning meetings, those research projects, and interacting with our customers. With that said, we'll get started and turn the call over to Howard.
Thanks, Ryan. I guess I'm happy that I'm not traveling so I can enjoy the foot of snow we've got here in wonderful West Coast Reno. It's a lot of good things happening out here, and I'm sure glad Cammie can join us today. She's got a lot of wonderful insights into the customer aspect, and I'm excited about having her. So as a result of that, we boiled down the number of questions we're going to take into what we're calling the number 2 one, the customer connection. And then Cammie is fortunate enough to have a wonderful client that she works with, going to participate and bring some real-world experience and connecting with the customer. And then the other question we're going to talk about is there's a Wall Street Journal article that came out the very end of January, first part of February, that kind of rattled it up a little bit into strategic planning arena. So we're going to delve into that, and Ryan had sent out the link, and hopefully people had a chance to look at that, because it just kind of brings us back to our roots and what we're thinking about when we're talking about strategy. So the first thing we're going to look at is the strategy stats that we kind of picked out, and one of the reasons we dug at this one is because we're still dealing with turbulent times as far as the forecast and research and so forth that I see. And I suspect a lot of the other people are feeling the same thing. We're going to be bouncing around here for a number of years until the government decides to put some basic foundations around what we're doing. I think we're going to have some turbulent times. So this does help bring us back to the square one of what we're thinking about. This came from BAIN, which is a worldwide consulting firm that definitely focuses on strategy and a bunch of other things. And I'm going to quote them a little bit later when I'm talking about the Wall Street Journal article. But the point being here is that over the last 10 years, and if we go back to 1998, 1999, we've been through a couple bumps in the economy and so forth, and there's been only 12% of the organizations worldwide that have showed more than a 5.5 to 6% growth year on year over the last 10 years. So my takeaway from that is that, it's all about diligence. It's about consistency. It's not an easy thing. It takes focus. And to underscore that, I just thought I'd throw in this. We've been doing research for a major international sales training organization, Miller Hyman, for a number of years, and they've got a wonderful study that they've collected, maybe 25,000 people participated in over the last 7 years. And this last year was really underscored the fact the world-class organization, ones that did really well, stuck right to their principles. They focused on their principles, and they showed about a 10 to 15% growth, both top line and bottom line, whereas the average companies that didn't stick to principles, that didn't focus, that didn't have their consistency on average showed a loss in revenues. They were down over year after year. So sustained growth is all about diligence, consistency, and focus, and I think we need to really take that to heart, particularly as we dig into both of these topics today. So I'm kind of excited what Cammie's got to share here about the customer connection and being able to talk with Michelle. And Cammie, you're in beautiful downtown Colorado Springs. Why don't you talk to us about customers?
Okay, great. Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about the focus and the consistency that needs to be maintained to achieve growth. I think a lot of times when you're reaching out to customers, if you don't have structure in the way that you're collecting feedback from them, you're apt to be more reactive. You're apt to not really have a system in place that takes that customer feedback and makes it work for the organization. So it's an important thing to go ahead and get customer feedback, of course, but you need to structure it further than that, and that's what we do through our assessment processes when we're developing strategic plans for companies. But, doing a SWOT assessment, for example, at the beginning of the strategic planning process is an absolute necessity, but taking that further, the continuation of assessments throughout the strategic plan's life is really a vital part of it, and to focus those assessments and make them strategically relevant helps not only give some organizational management insight into your customer data, it also can work to keep your strategies relevant. So if we can go to the next slide. What we have here is our approach to overcoming that big hurdle and making sure that strategic plans stay relevant over the lifespan of that plan. And everyone knows that strategic plans do not operate in a vacuum. And they're long documents. You've got 5 years to try to execute this thing. And when you start off, no one has a crystal ball. They don't know what's going to happen in 5 years. So the importance of execution in the process is a huge factor, of course. The regular strategy reviews, the reporting process, making sure that those are clearly defined at the beginning of the strategic plan is important. But how do you get outside of that strategic plan stagnation? How do you do that? Well, one very great tool for that, in our opinion, is utilizing the Net Promoter Score concept. And this is a way to go ahead and get that information from customers and even internally from your staff for employee engagement to get their insights, which can be super effective in making sure that you know along the way of that strategic plan's lifespan what your organization's strengths are, where those weaknesses seem to start arising, and how to provide triage to those weaknesses or also to enhance your strengths. So let's talk here a little bit about the Net Promoter Score. there's a main question that is asked on this survey process, and it's how likely would you recommend your company to a friend or colleague. So this takes the whole concept of satisfaction and sort of bumps it up into a level of loyalty. And based on the responses, the respondents can be put into categories. If they go ahead and rate you high, they are your promoters. If they're in the mid-gray areas, they're your passively satisfied customers. And if they rate you 6 or below, they are detractors. And you can see by the words that are used how valuable that can be from an organizational management perspective, that based on the different percentages, if you have a large amount of detractors in your survey responses, then you need to work on something. You need to figure out what's going on, because these are the people that can spread bad word of mouth, and it's a very damaging thing. Where on the flip side, those promoters on the other end, they are your good word of mouth people, and there's a lot of data that supports that word of mouth is the most effective way to market and advertise your service. So if you've got those promoters out there singing, praises about your company, that's where your growth is. So you want to make sure that, those people that are rating you 9 or 10 to the question above are the ones that you nurture. Those passively satisfied people in the middle, those customers, they offer a lot of insight. They are the people that are sitting on the fence. They can be very vulnerable to competitive offers because they're not completely satisfied up to the promoter level, which is really loyalty. And, with just a few slips, they can easily become detractors. So that's the NPS question, and we really like it. But when we go ahead and do these assessments using NPS, we take it a bit further because we want more insight on why people are rating us a certain rating when answering this question, which if we'll go ahead and get to the next slide, this is something that we do. Since we've got the customer's attention, we go ahead and we think that, developing questions to give us insight on what is actually influencing those loyalty levels is something that it's an opportunity, and this is how we like to structure it to make it relevant towards the strategic plan or strategic goals of any organization. This is actually based on the balanced scorecard concept, which we won't go into the balanced scorecard here, but it is on our MyStrategicPlan.com under references. There's a whole section on balanced scorecard and its merits. But for our purposes here, we'd like to focus on how questions developed from scorecard categories help create insight into keeping the strategic decisions of an organization relevant. So you can see that we've got these management categories over in the far left, starting at the bottom. The organizational management for innovation and learning, internal operations, for customer experiences, and we don't put the financial category of the balanced scorecard in here because that's just more of an outcome type of metric. But what you can see here is that if you go ahead and take any, given organization strategic goals, perhaps they would fall into these types of statements. Now, when we go ahead and assess and do these outreach surveys with our internal and external stakeholders, if we can develop questions that are in alignment with these balanced scorecard categories, then we've got something that management can sink their teeth into based on the kind of feedback that we receive in the categories. So if, for example, questions in the customer category are all trending low, then that gives the management some insight into organizationally where they need to put focus. Now, the good thing about aligning this with strategic goals is that it helps keep your strategic plan relevant. With the data that you receive in these categories, you can align the execution process, those meetings, those reports, you can pull in these questions and really find relevance in the assessments, and making sure that what is happening externally with the customers is always being injected into the strategic execution process. And that is a crucial key in making sure the strategic plans stay relevant. It is the customer that we're focusing on. It is their insight when we're doing those external assessments, but we can also do these internally for employee engagement. You make sure that your workforce is performing to the degree that they should perform, not only to satisfy the principles of a balanced scorecard, but also to make sure that the fundamentals of the strategic plan have the champions that you might need internally to be able to reach those strategic objectives and goals and such. So this assessment process, one of the most critical things about it, though, is just like strategic execution, the assessment process needs to be consistent. It needs to be regular. That is the only way that you're going to be able to get data that is robust enough that you can really start making solid organizational decisions upon. So this chart is just our way to communicate that to you all, and it's something that it accomplishes a few things. It drives data that is useful from the organizational management perspective. This data then serves as a gauge that can help make strategic decisions relevant. And when combined with a consistent strategic execution method, these regular assessments help keep your plan agile. So that's the driving points that we want to talk about here on this slide when it pertains to those driving questions to develop along with the NPS. They also give you insight with why people are scoring you in the certain categories of the Net Promoter Score. And we do a lot of post-data analysis that we can correlate the tendency of maybe any one of these questions and how closely they are tied in with the NPS number. So that's what you can do with data as it develops and becomes robust. There's just a multitude of insights that you can get from really going in and analyzing the data. So it's very important to have that routine consistency when you're doing these assessments, not only for making the strategic plan stay agile, but for giving you insight that you can dive into later that has strategic validity. So let's go ahead and get to how we communicate this to our clients. This is our online dashboard that we use to aggregate all the data as it comes in. The process is that we go ahead and we send surveys out for our clients, usually every week. And with the data, this program aggregates it, and you can see how the benchmarking starts to lay out, where any given organization, if they have several different locations around the nation, if they are broken down into regions or divisions or whatever, you can see how our bar graph here helps track that. So say if we're dealing with how the company's branches might be doing in a certain city. If you look at the yellow bar, you see in this specific instance in Seattle, this mock company would be performing low according to the benchmarks of the company has established the data at the state level, the region level, the division level, and the corporate level. So you can see here that we have a system for calculating the NPS, which is this gauge that you see in the upper left. And then we have all sorts of variances at the bottom. This variance chart helps whoever is looking at this determine how far off in the corporate average that these entities, the region, the division, the state, and the city, might be off from the benchmark that has been created by the data. So this is a very, very useful tool in being able to take everything that I just talked about in the last two slides and make it something that is actionable. And this is why we actually called Michelle McClarney of Spartan Staffing into this process and into this presentation. Spartan Staffing is a company based out of South Carolina with 50 locations nationwide, and we worked with Michelle for a couple of years, and recently we relaunched their customer loyalty program this summer after the organization had acquired another staffing company. We think that Michelle can give us some excellent insight on how Spartan management views this driver data and NPS data and uses it as a tool in helping Spartan stay on track strategically. So if we could go ahead and make sure that Michelle is unmuted. Michelle, if you'd like to give your insight on how Spartan uses this to stay strategically relevant and help with your organizational management, it would be excellent to hear your opinion because I know that you guys really work this program well.
Thanks, Cammie. Yeah, Spartan Staffing is actually part of a company with multiple brands, and it's True Blue. One of our strategic objectives is to be the service leader and grow fast to the market. Part of that objective is to capture and cultivate customer loyalty. We're using M3 to assist us in this and using the dashboard like the one, similar to the one that's shown on the screen now, to really look at our promoters of our company and the passives and detractors to find out where we can develop initiatives around the different categories and take those passives and move them into promoters or take the detractors and move them through the other two categories. With knowing where we fall on our NPS score, we're taking 7 driving questions that are based on like the skill of our assignment employees that we assign to different jobs. We're looking at motivation of those assignment employees, and we're looking at basically 3 questions that have to do with our assignment employees' place. And we're looking at 3 questions that related to the branch staff who are communicating and sending assignment employees out to the different customers. And then we're looking at another driving question that has to do with partnership. And based on the responses and the average scores and the feedback that we get from our customers, we are looking at a variety of things. You know, if it has to do with our skills and our employees, is our knowledge of what our customer wants in the branches, or is it that we need to do a better job interviewing our employees? If it's something related to the 3 questions related to our branch staff, we're looking at what we can do better, what additional training opportunities we can have. Because we know that if we can improve all of these different driving categories, it's going to lead to them to see us as a valuable long-term partner, which then in turn is going to help us to create additional loyalty and be able to get the referrals from them. But based on all of the information that we find out from our customers, we've got to not only read it and listen to it, but we've got to take action, and we've got to communicate with our customers about service improvements that we're putting in place or initiatives that we have. And we've got to take advantage and ask those people that say that they're willing to refer Spartan to a friend or a colleague and ask them for that lead to help us grow and be a service leader for our industry. And capturing and cultivating those loyal customers is what leads to all of our profitable growth. And I really think that this program that Cammie and Howard have helped put together for us has really helped to get our feet on the ground running, to make service improvements where our customers have said we needed to, because it's the voice of your customer that's providing the responses to you. And it's really been very valuable for us since we've implemented this program. And we've seen our response rates with lots of communication from our branches and senior management to our customers go from, I think, Cammie, was it 11% in Q4 to 30% now?
That's right.
So, I mean, we've really taken a hold of this. And it's not only within our Spartan Staffing, but the other brands within True Blue are also either have implemented or are implementing customer loyalty programs such as this one.
Michelle, how does it help you drive organizational decision as far as the management goes of your value proposition to your customers?
Well, we really look at, you know, it as a whole, you know, the service of the employees, the service of the staff to the customers. And, you know, we have what we call a Spartan 360 approach to things, where we are looking to communicate and discover with our prospects and our customers and we're asking questions about what they need. Then we have a precision of our hiring process and meeting our customer requirements, and we have a compliance measurement too. This is our compliance measurement that we're using to look at our strategies and see really, do we need to create new websites to benefit our customers? Do we need to promote, do some new internal processes? Do we need to look at a wide variety of things? And, right now we're really, because we've just relaunched it within the last couple of quarters, we're getting ready to go through some analysis with you guys, and I think after we go through that quarterly analysis, we'll be able to really look at some initiatives to sustain the growth of our company going forward.
Great. Yeah, that's part of the ability to stay strategically relevant to the plan. Your plan is to be able to do this, take that data as it aggregates over a long period of time, for this example, a quarterly period of time, and then use that data to make sure that your strategic direction is on track. And if it's not on track, we say it all the time, strategic plans need to be able to live and breathe. And this is the kind of data that helps you determine what needs to be shifted, if anything, within your strategic plan. What needs to be created to be able to perhaps provide some triage to any type of weakness or threat that might be encroaching upon an organization. And also to enhance the strengths and make sure that when you do find things that work through this data of taking regular assessments, that you make sure that best practices are shared. It's not best practices that come from some textbook. It's best practices as you see them rolling out almost in real time through a regular assessment process. And this is what this dashboard is communicating, and that is what we collect through using NPS and the driver questions that we develop. So let's just get to some summary action points, because we only do have an hour. We can talk about this forever because it's just good stuff. But here's some actions for y'all. Assess the process that you may have in place that can alert you to any emerging weaknesses as well as spotlight your strengths. Do you have a process, number one? But, assess the ones that you have, and are they effective? Consider the importance of aligning any customer or staff survey effort with principles of the balanced scorecard. Thereby you bring strategic relevance to your data. Actively collect the data with consistency and reference it regularly to keep your strategic efforts relevant. And when the data drives it, create those best practices and share it with other business units, which is great also just to bust the silo effect that a lot of companies that have multiple locations or big, large departments. This data is just great. You can start to talk to each other at a different level instead of just being, the tendency to be myopic within your own realm. So those are the key points. I definitely want to ask Howard for your input on what you see as far as NPS and how those driver questions help the strategic plan stay relevant and get us to where we all want to be, into that growth realm. So, Howard, do you want to go ahead and make any comments?
I've got one thought, and then Ryan's telling me here there was a couple questions that came in for Michelle. So I think you might want to bring a question to Michelle.
Oh, we can do that first. We had a question typed in as a chat box via participant, and it was said, I'll just read it. It says, thank you for your insights, Michelle. How long does it take to develop a program like you did? Do you feel the investment was worthwhile? Was it worth the effort? And I'll go ahead and unmute you and turn it over to you, Michelle. There we go.
Definitely feel it was worth it. I think Howard and a team of us spent about 3 to 6 months developing the program and the questions and the dashboard when we originally launched it in 2008. And then last year we spent another 3 months relaunching it to the company again, because we did a huge acquisition and merger of 2 brands. And I think it's paying for itself. And it's been very valuable insight for us to learn what our customers truly feel about the services we provide, the assignment employees that we provide.
we've been able to make some incremental improvements.
Well, thank you, Michelle. Appreciate your feedback there to the question. So that was the one question that we had on the chat box. Now I'll turn it back over to Howard.
Thanks, Michelle. We're going to appreciate that plug. We'll email Starbucks double latte skinny one over to you this morning. The one point I think that I'd like to drive from a strategic standpoint, and Michelle really and her team really work on this so dramatically, is the fact that understanding our promoters is what drives very good top line and bottom line revenue. The thought behind the NPS program is that our promoters are folks that are going to hang with us. As Cammie said, that they're very loyal. They'll take a few bounces with us. They're more profitable customers. We don't have to be giving them all kinds of extra goodies. They're in there for the long time for the value. So from a strategic standpoint, the investment that Spartan has made in understanding their customers, and by the way, they get it real well. Their NPS score is extremely high. I can't remember exactly where it is, but it's pushing in the 50 number area, and the average in the United States right now for an organization in the industrial sector is somewhere around 5. So the Spartan team really gets it. They've got a lot of promoters, and the promoters then drive good top line as well as higher bottom line revenue. And particularly we need this, and then we're seeing a lot of our research. You really need to understand your customers in these turbulent times, which kind of then leads into this next article. This Wall Street Journal article, which is pretty interesting that we see. It was actually published by one of the hallmark organizations in the U.S. that comes up with business thoughts. But this article came out at the end of January. I forget the exact date, 28th, 25th. But the title is "Strategic Plans Lose Favor. Slump Showed Bosses Value Flexibility, Quick Decisions." So I've got a little thought when I looked at that title. You want to go on to the next slide? When I looked at that title, it says, okay, if strategic plans are losing favor, okay, in other words, if they're going down, it implies that something else must be gaining favor. If strategic planning is losing in these turbulent times, what's gaining favor? So Ryan's going to do a little polling on the side, and it's just type stuff in, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on. But if strategic planning is losing favor, what business practice is taking its place? What do you think organizations should be using to help out in these times and find some kind of compass to make through these turbulent times? So we'll talk about that as we roll through this. The article, thanks to Ryan, we sent it out. There's a link to it. It's still alive at the Wall Street Journal. And there's obviously a number of topics and so forth in there, but I just pulled out two primary issues. The reason I did that is because of, and you'll see as we go through this, who wrote them and who said this. So I wanted just to highlight two of them. We could probably talk about a whole bunch more of them. But there was numerous comments that were attached to this article, and that helped summarize things. And then also that the Wall Street Journal didn't just a week or so ago published another letter to the editor, so they actually published it versus just a comment. So it did. This little article did stir up a lot of thoughts and so forth. So the first issue that I want to talk about here and get folks' feedback is this: that the statement came from Walt Schill, who's the head of a North American consulting practice of Accenture. I mean, this is a large organization, as we all know, rolled out of Arthur Andersen, who is no longer, and it says, Walt Schill, head of North American management consulting practice for Accenture Limited, is even more blunt. Strategy as we knew it is dead. He contends that it's dead. So the point that I'm making with this, if this is really dead, then what's replacing it? And I go back to kind of my roots in old Michael Porter, that strategy guru out of Harvard and so forth. There's an HBR article in 1996, and I just pulled one sentence out of it. It says, competitive strategy is about being different. It means deliberately choosing to perform activities differently or to perform different activities than rivals to deliver a unique mix of value. And there's three words in there that keep popping out to me, like the word different. Strategy is about being different. And it's always going to be. I don't know how we can be dead. I don't know how that isn't going to continue forward. And we have to choose, just like what Spartan does. They choose to participate with their customers and take that thought and then be different to perform their services for them that will then provide value, which is the third word. So to me, these words are not dead. They're very much alive. So I'm a little taken back by his statement as we knew it, because I suspect in what I see and what we see in all our practices, principles are going to continue to roll forward no matter how turbulent times are. So to continue on with this issue, the rest of Art Schill's statement says, he contends that the strategy is dead. Corporate clients decided that increased flexibility and accelerated decision-making are much more important than simply predicting the future. And so I'm looking at that and talking to clients and talking to people and reading the blog posts and the comments and so forth about it, and I'm just at a loss to why strategic planning doesn't provide flexibility and it doesn't provide accelerated decision-making. I threw a couple of points underneath here. What we find is that it's definitely always about implementation and execution ability of the organization. So if we're doing that, then we're able to participate in being more agile, being more flexible. We can make accelerated decisions. So if we're doing the strategic planning process well and we're not dead, we're going to have the increased flexibility. The second point is definitely about instilling a corporate culture that embraces strategic change and performance. We find that time and time again that the culture is definitely essential, and we'll find at Spartan, and I go back to them because I've talked with them a bunch of times on the phone. They've got so many of their people from around the United States who participate in this training, and their culture is about embracing change, or the culture is embracing things that come across their desk from the customers and be able to react to those as it happens. And they're not made in granite. And so strategy's always been about that. And then finally, it's definitely not about simply predicting the future. And I never knew that strategic planning was about that. Just predicting the future and holding on and hoping for the best. We find time and time again that if you're not trying to predict the future, or trying to do some kind of forecasting and trending, then you really get caught short. So, again, going back to Spartan, is if we're talking to our customers and we're seeing what they want, we're looking at these driver questions, and they start changing, we are able then to, quote, predict how to provide value to them. So, strategic planning is not dead. I'm sorry to say that, Walt Schill, even though he does have a prominent position. So the second issue is about, if I read the whole statement, which is a leading sentence in that, and again, this is from the two Wall Street Journal writers, they're basically saying that during recession, as business forecasts based on seemingly plausible swings in sales smack up against reality, executives discover that strategic planning doesn't always work. And we always smack up against reality. None of us have a crystal ball. And if we're not looking at the future and trying to understand where we're headed, we're going to get caught flat-footed. So what I did is these points I've got underneath it with the true, I pulled some of the blog posts forward so we could look at those. And also in the article we talk about static 5-year strategic plans don't always work. And I couldn't wholeheartedly more agree. I think everybody participating in this call would say that. We know strategic plans are not static. They're all about execution, as we said in the first issue. And as we move forward, we embrace the change and we pick up things and we change. So they're not etched in granite and not stuck up on it. And I see that so many times when in our consulting work and so forth, people have these 5-year plans. They call them 5-year plans like they're going to accomplish it. Well, it's a 5-year plan. We just plan 5 years out and we keep changing every 3, 6, 9 months and so forth as issues pop up. And the point that I see with the second one, true, rate of change and the width of validity is much wider and faster. That comes out of another blog post. The world that we all exist in business, whether it be in Spartan in providing temporary staffing, the validity of change, business is bouncing up and down, and Spartan has to be really nimble to be able to provide the customers, their customers, the staffing, temporary staffing employees that they need. So the rate of change is faster. We're in a global business, and we all have to be prepared. So strategic planning is critical to have. And the next two are very similar in nature. Good businesses don't change strategies every month. Strategy plan is a dynamic, evolving, living thing. And the way I want to wrap those 2 points up is out of the letter to the editor that the Wall Street Journal published, and it says, the writer was a fellow out of Allen, Texas. He said, "I'm sure Apple hasn't changed its strategic plan to be the best in the consumer technology, nor has Walmart moved away from a strategic plan of being the most cost-competitive and outstanding distributor of consumer goods, even with the Great Recession." So turbulent times require a plan. Turbulent times require looking into the future and making the shifts as we encourage and find them, every month or 90 days or whatever. Tactics change. So I'd like to wrap this up a little bit, and geez, I'm sorry that if you can't see this too well, but the point I'm trying to make with this is this comes from BAIN. Again, they've been doing a study on the top 25 management tools that have been in place since the early 90s, and since 1996, strategic planning has been the #1 tool up until 2008. But it still is the #1 management tool with the highest satisfaction. You'll see the mean there is 4.01. The interesting takeaway from this one is that if we would compare the 09 to the 08, the percentage of usage, we'll find that across the board that companies backed off on all their planning processes, all their tools. Strategic planning usage fell from 88% to 67%. So tying this whole thing together, I guess we'd have to say that the Wall Street Journal article was true in one standpoint, that in fact that strategic planning did fall from favor. People quit using it. What happened in the recession, the Great Recession, is that a lot of companies lost focus, a lot of companies lost their direction, and they started reacting day after day, time after time. And the studies that we've done, we found that on the average, most companies over this last period of time have been experiencing top-line loss declines, revenue declining 15, 10, 20, and more percent. And when you find out and start talking to them, they have lost their way. They have, because of the turbulent times, they didn't know where they really were going, they didn't understand strategic planning, nor that they executed or implemented very well. They then lost their way, lost their focus, and as a result had problems. And this study shows exactly what's happening. The interesting thing is, part of the study, they said that strategic planning for these firms that participated, there's about 4,000 or 5,000 firms that participate in this thing. Strategic planning for 2010 is anticipated to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 88%. It's come back up again, Ryan. So strategic planning is people realizing that they need it. So the takeaway from this is 3 points, 4 points. No, I guess I got 5. Can't count too well this morning. Need another cup of coffee. Take a long-term perspective. That's, like Apple, like Walmart, like the stalwarts out there. Take a long-term perspective. What are you about? What are you doing differently that Michael Porter said? How are you providing that value? Continue to do it. You might change your short-term actions just to get there, but the long-term perspective has to be in place. Be flexible. The rate of change is going to intensify. It isn't going to get any easier. The global world, the global marketplace, with the way information flies around so fast, we're going to have those issues, along with businesses we call them content games. Say the word this morning, but where changes intensify throughout when one little domino falls. And as Cammie said initially at the beginning, it's all about implementing. Take that plan, take that program, make sure that you've got your program to focus on your customers, to focus on being strategic and implement it. Even if you don't have a really great plan, implementation is what it's all about. There's assessing your organization. Assess how strategic are you? How nimble are you? I found a couple different assessments online. They're free and so forth. It would be a good idea to assess the culture of your organization because you have to be agile. Being agile and understanding, just like what Spartan does, and as they get comments coming in, if they get a detractor, whatever else, a couple people start saying it, they react. They're agile, and they take those customer comments to heart. With that little last point there, Cammie, if you got a thought that you'd like to add in to this, because I know you wrote a couple blog posts on the Wall Street Journal article, and I know you're pretty passionate about it.
Well, I think, there's definitely points to take away from that article, but one of the main things that I found as far as the reporting went is that it didn't go into any of the implementation or execution strategies of the people that they interviewed. So you really don't know if they had any strategy at all, which is a vital key in the whole process. So it wasn't really insightful in that way. So the headline was sort of a misnomer. But at any rate, the fact is that perfection is in the process. You don't have to have a perfect strategic plan from the get-go, something that, you can go ahead and bronze. The fact is that it has to change. It has to change. And if your organization does not have a process in place and data in place that helps you give insight to that change, then you're driving blind. So it's the process. The perfection is in the process. Strategic plans shouldn't be, the onset of them. You shouldn't try to achieve a perfect strategic plan. The perfection is in the process. I love that phrase. I think it is really important when talking about strategic plans. So that's my input on that.
You are passionate about that. You're going to have to get your a couple more blog posts. Thanks.
Well, I had my coffee this morning.
We'll email you another one.
We had we had a couple participants type in. One of the latest ones that we just got, I think it rings true and kind of adds on to what Cammie was just talking about there. And it said, I'll read it, it's a little bit long, but here we go. It says, to me, the idea of not doing strategic planning because things change and we need to be able to respond in spite of our strategic plan is like not doing fire prevention because fires happen and we need to be able to respond. Similarly, not responding to a change in the environment because it wasn't in our strategic plan would be like not fighting a type of fire because we didn't plan on having to fight that particular type of fire. We should do like fire companies do. Fight the fires when they occur. Work on achieving your vision of the future when you have the time and resources to do it.
Wow.
Kind of an interesting parallel there to fighting fires. I mean, you got to do them and put it out and keep moving forward.
We're going to have this.
That's hot.
Yeah, awesome. What else we get there, Ryan?
The same person actually was an earlier one, but it kind of tied into what Howard's talking about. I thought it fit perfectly. It said, I think Mr. Schill's quote makes for a great soundbite, but it doesn't make him right. Obviously, in times of turmoil, increased flexibility and the decision-making are important. And strategic planning isn't about predicting the future, it's about making your future. Don't forget the Alan Kay's quote, the best way to predict the future is to invent it.
Wow.
So two very insightful posts by Mr. Glassenberg, and really appreciate it.
Well, I know who's going to do the next strategy huddle. Somebody's got really insight. Thanks. Did you have another one, or was that?
That's sweet. If anybody else has any last questions, we do have a few minutes. We could take a question on the fly here. Otherwise, we could wrap up and share. I'll try to wrap it up. So if you have another question you want to type in, on the fly question, we could do that. But just go over the next huddle. It will be March 31st at 9 a.m. So instead of the fourth, I think it's the fourth Wednesday, it's the fifth Wednesday, I believe. So last Wednesday of the month for March. If you have any questions, we always take them. Please send them in to admin@MyStrategicPlan and just reference the Strategy Huddle. Also, we're looking for any strategy leaders. If you're interested in sharing or presenting a best practice, we're not talking about a 10-minute presentation. If you just want to pop in on the backside and talk a few minutes, or if you have a slide that you'd like to share, we encourage it. We'd love to have a couple participants and strategy leaders share a little bit. Also, from a selfish interest, if you're interested, follow us on Twitter. We share some tips there, give you some information about the Strategy Huddle and some other insights on blogs and articles that are written. And just a recap on today's session, it is being recorded, and it will be posted along with the online PowerPoint deck by the end of the week. And Cami also had a handout to go along with the Net Promoter Scorecard stuff that she went over. So we will be sending that out by end of week. Hand it off to Howard for any last thoughts. Otherwise, there's no questions coming in, so we can wrap up and get everybody back to work and looking at their action items for the next couple days.
Boy, as I think about all the way from not that we put it together this way, but as I look back over this last hour, we go from the point of the strategy stat, we're showing that there are not that many organizations that over a period of time that can continue to deliver value or top-line returns. And then tied into understanding the customers that Spartan is so passionate about getting a hold of. And then as Cami said, it isn't about a perfect plan. It's about taking the information from the customers, taking about being our strategic thought, and then implement, along with making sure we got our finger on the pulse of what's happening. And as particularly as what I think of, and I've seen over even the next couple of years, we're going to have some turbulent times, and to be in a position to take advantage of situations that strategic plans can be critical. So we appreciate everybody's time today.
And thank you, Michelle McClarney, for being a part of this. You really added some great insight, and we thank you for your time.
I appreciate spending some time with Michelle and talking with her again. She's always bright and cheery, and we appreciate you taking actually part of your lunchtime to be with us today, Michelle. We'll talk to you later. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great week.